Hello, I'm James Glenny.
And I'm Andrew Glenny.
Together we completed a science project entitled Dog Paw Dominance, a study in dog groups' paw preference and associated behaviors.
How did we come up with this topic for a project like this?
Our project is a continuation of a previous project I did in the 4th grade. I wondered why some dog breeds had certain jobs over others. My research showed that, in humans at least, right-handed versus left-handedness use different sides of the brain. That correlated to what types of jobs a human might do in the future. For example, an artist versus a teacher versus a scientist. I wondered if dogs had a paw preference and if their paw preference meant that they would be better suited for a specific job too. In the 4th grade, it was ambitious to only test one breed and get a large enough sample size, so I tested all dogs of all genders, breeds, and ages, and asked a more simple question: do dogs have a paw dominance? Since having done this project, I have honed my abilities to wonder about broader correlations between paw dominance and specific breeds. We watched the National Dog Show, and I was fascinated to learn about some of the history of each dog breed and how they are classified into groups based on their historic duties, such as herding, vermin control, or hunting. Now that I'm in 8th grade, the desire to study dog breeds and how paw dominance plays into their behaviors seemed more pressing, especially as I learned that dogs were being used to sniff out diseases and viruses such as COVID-19.
Although it was his 4th grade science project that got things started, I was a 3rd grader at the time and had assisted with that first project.
Before we go further, let us explain the basic design of the project. Aside from getting the necessary forms signed off to verify no harm was coming to any dog, we put together 2 cardboard tubes on a platform, had a roll of painter's tape, and a bucket of dog treats. We performed a series of 3 tests, each done 3 times to ensure accuracy.
The first test we completed is to place a treat in the tube and simply observe which paw the dog uses to try to retrieve the treat that is just out of reach. We do this for 30 seconds at a time, or until the dog gets it, whichever comes first. While they paw the tube, we count how many times the subject uses its right paw and how many times it uses its left paw.
The second test is a walking test. The dog sits or stands still with weight evenly distributed, and we have them take a step forward. The paw that moves forward first is marked down.
The last test is the paint on the nose test. We place a piece of tape on the bridge of the dog's nose and observe count each time they use their right paw and how many times they use their left paw to remove the tape. The most interesting part of this experiment was truly how individual each dog is. We had dogs who really liked treats, and we had some dogs who did not care for treats at all. We had some dogs that did not care about the tape on their nose, while others couldn't wait to take it off. We had some dogs wonder where the treat went when it was in the tube, while others started to chew on the tube. It was interesting to see the dog's uniqueness.
I thought that the most interesting part of the subject follows the answer to our next question. Why is your project important in today's society? The most interesting part of this experiment was truly seeing the possibilities of where this research leads. We discovered that dogs were being used to sniff out COVID-19 virus in people. We also heard that some dogs are able to smell a seizure approaching up to 45 minutes before it may happen. Dogs sniff out bombs, buried bodies, comfort people at hospitals or those with PTSD or autism, and others work at hunting, herding, or guarding. Dogs have many purposes, and many of them tie back to the dog's behavior. Just imagine if instead of having to pick a number of puppies to go into a certain field not knowing whether they are the best for the job or not, you could run a simple paw dominance test to determine what the best job for them is based off their dominance in their breed. You could also use this test to find out if a dog is more likely to be adopted too, as some owners are looking for dogs for companionship in a child-free home or a child-full home. In general, we had some interesting findings.
Our goal was to test at least 5 dogs from 8 identified groups for a total of 40 dogs. We were able to test 50 dogs. This was no small feat during a pandemic where social distancing is expected and where we were specific to wanting purebred dogs to satisfy our group classifications. Overall, 15 were right-pawed, 19 were left-pawed, and 16 were ambidextrous. This proved that most dogs had an equal chance of being under any of the 3 dominants. When classified by their AKC groupings, the hound, sporting, and toy group dominantly left-pawed, the working group was right-pawed, and the remaining herding, non-sporting, terrier, and mixed groups were ambidextrous. Only the toy and working groups met our hypothesis. Unfortunately, we had no canon way of testing the dogs for behavior, so we used a subjective intake survey completed by their owner. One owner may be more harsh on the behaviors of their own pet versus an owner who oversees their dog's flaws. Using the owner's analysis, we found that more left-paw a dog was, the more likely they were to have a higher score, meaning that they were more likely to be less domesticated around other animals and humans.
We also noticed some obstacles that made it into our conclusion. We observed that some of the dogs might have object permanence, where once an object disappears from view, their brain thinks that the object has actually disappeared. This happened during the tube test, so we thought that for the future, we should make clearer tubes. Some of the dogs did not respond at all to the tape on their nose, and sometimes it wouldn't even stick. We thought that we might consider some stickier tape for the future.
Moving forward, in a testing season where a pandemic is not present, we hope to gather more data on each AKC group.
We may narrow down the research further and only test dogs between the ages of 2 to 6, prime years of a dog's working life. All of the dogs that we tested had interesting stories, and we are thankful to the owners for letting us use them and for them volunteering their time.
Thank you for listening to our project.